Hi, all. Welcome to this session. Welcome to this series of lectures in psychology. And in this session, we shall be discussing one of the most exciting, one of the most researched upon areas in psychology. That is memory. Uh, let's take a deeper dive into the concept. So, um, as I just said, memory is an area that's been exciting various areas, not only psychology. In fact, if you recall some of the very interesting movies that you must have watched, I'm sure Catch Me If You Can is about one young protagonist who's got a super memory, and he of course, the capability which he mobilizes for the wrong causes. Or if you look at the Manchurian Candidate, if you watch the movie, Denzel Washington, wherein the memory of this protagonist is tampered with by embedding a software chip into his brain, and thus manipulating his memory. Or if you have watched some movies like 12 Angry Men, the black and white footage that you see, 12 Angry Men, wherein the entire drama moves around the accusation on a kid who is held for the murder, and mostly it depends upon the memory of the witnesses who claim that the kid is the murderer, and the rest of the drama is all about um, discussing, deliberating, debating, arguing on the witnesses, and a few more as you see around, if you there, which are about some of the memory conditions, health conditions, or memory mental conditions, disorders. If you say, if you look at this movie, played very well by Drew Barrymore, 50 First Dates, wherein the female lead keeps losing her memory with every new dawn, every new day, right? Or may it be A Beautiful Mind, an Oscar-winning movie by Russell Crowe, wherein he plays a schizophrenic mathematics professor at the Princeton University, where he sees things that the others don't in reality, and wherein he portrays as a patient with a mental condition called schizophrenia. Or a couple of popular Indian movies. I'm sure you must have seen Ghajini, as you see the footage, the image, wherein the protagonist is suffering from a mental condition called short-term memory loss, and a movie called Black, wherein the protagonist suffers from this mental condition where he forgets things as he ages, and he develops a rare mental condition called Alzheimer's. So, one common thread that passes through all these movies, which have drawn the attention of the audience, is the aspect of memory. In some cases, it is artificial. In some cases, it is super human memory. In some cases, it comes with some mental condition, some disability. But all said and done, we must agree that memory has been an aspect which has been exciting the mankind very much since times immemorial. And so that sets the significance, the criticality of memory as our mental faculty, along with others. And with that, let's set the ball rolling. Let's try to understand the deeper aspects of what operates memory, what are the various components around memory, how does it function, what are the various dynamics, what are the limitations, what are the strengths of this mental faculty called memory. Okay. Right, so those are a few distinctions that we need to understand before we go into the further discussion. So the three important distinctions are the stages of memory, the storage spaces of memory, and the types of memory as you see down below there. Okay, so the stages of memory, when you talk about stages, so the formation of memory about any object or event or people, it passes through various stages. The first of which is encoding, wherein you first gather the stimulus. The stimulus could be anything. Stimulus could be a person or event or an experience, a place, an object, anything which you're trying to you are exposed to, you're trying to understand, you're trying to interpret, you're trying to perceive, and you're trying to derive a meaning out of it, and then with the meaning, with the understanding, you're trying to push it to the next stage of memory formation, which is storage. With understanding, you're pushing it into the storage, so that in certain future date, maybe at a later date, when you are in need of that particular piece of memory, you can retrieve, right? So those form the three stages of memory, namely encoding, storing, and retrieval. We will discuss each of these at a deeper level as we go further. Okay, so while those were the stages of memory storage spaces. So you need a storage space to deposit the memory of the facts of people, experiences, events, and we've got one of the most magnificent creations of human anatomy called the brain, which and the associated, of course, the extended messengers of information, your sensory organs, and the bundles of neurons that connect the various sensory organs with the brain, resulting in storage of memory. So with that view, if you look at the storage space, it can be broadly classified into three spaces, namely sensory memory, which is like everywhere across the body. All the sensory organs have a little amount of memory, but then that's not the space that can retain your memory. It just falls upon your sensory organ and it fades in no time. As you can see, the capacity of sensory spaces to hold the information is not more than a fraction of a second. It falls and it fades, may it be on eyes or ears or your skin or nose or the tongue. It falls and it fades unless you put some deliberate exercise to push that piece of information to the next stage of storage space. Deliberate, what do you mean by deliberate exercise? It could be rehearsing, it could be mugging, it could be recalling, it could be by heart, learning by heart, it could be understanding, it could be interpreting, it could be discussing. Any of these deliberate exercises that you put in to understand, then the information in sensory memory gets pushed to the short-term memory, and thereby it gets pushed to the long-term memory. Okay, so those are three storage spaces. Sensory memory, which doesn't hold any piece of information for more than a fraction of a second. Short-term memory, which is also called as the working memory. Working memory, where the various processes of information take place with regard to the memory, which is the point of pushing the information into your long-term memory, right? Which can hold the information just less than a minute, which is a few seconds, and where you are actually doing all those exercises like a rehearsal or understanding or mugging up or discussing, where you are picking the information from sensory memory and you're putting it through certain process, deliberate conscious process, and then you're pushing it to long-term memory. So that's how a piece of stimulus or information gets pushed from sensory through short-term to the long-term memory. Those are the memory storage spaces, um, which are which help in pushing the memory from sensory to the long-term memory. And long-term memory, as it suggests, long-term memory, there is no defined limit for the storage space in long-term memory, or there is no defined limit of time in the long-term memory. They are absolutely undefined and unlimited, unless it suffers from a, a traumatic condition, like those conditions that we just discussed in reference to some of the movies, like memory loss due to amnesia, or the disability to failure to disability of failure to retain information due to certain mental conditions, due to the failure of certain parts of the brain. The person might become incapacitated to retain information, and hence that might prevent one from holding the memory, right? So that was memory storage spaces. We discussed stages of memory: encoding, storage, and retrieval. We discussed these storage spaces, namely sensory memory, or sensory memory, short-term memory or working memory, and the long-term memory. And so not all long-term memory is of the same kind. If you look at the two images below, long-term memory can be classified broadly into these two types, wherein say explicit memory would mean, what do you mean by explicit memory? Explicit memory is any such piece of information for which you will have to do some conscious digging into your memory to pull out the information. So for instance, if you are asked as to what is 13 multiplied by 7, so it may not be a very implicit piece of information lying on the top of your head. You may either have to revisit the tables that you had you had learned when you were a kid, and say 13 sevens is 91, or you may have to do a quick multiplication of 13 and 7, and you may have to derive the result, that is 91. So the point we are trying to say is, it's not something that happens automatically or subconsciously. There has to be a conscious recall, a retrieval, or a recollection of the piece of information, which is referred to as explicit memory. Whereas implicit memory is something where you don't have to consciously derive information from your memory storage. It acts subconsciously. For instance, driving a car or riding a bicycle, you don't have to go and visit a manual on how to drive a car or how to balance a bicycle every time you ride or drive the vehicles, right? So that's something that has gone and settled down deep down there in your subconscious. So you just have to work, operate at your subconscious level, and things just go on. So this kind of memory in the long-term memory is what we refer to as implicit memory. That's how explicit and implicit differ from each other. Okay, so that was the types of long-term memory. And and how does brain operate between the functions of encoding and retrieval? Encoding is where you are trying to, as we discussed earlier, one of the stages of memory, the first stage of memory, where you're trying to understand, you're trying to interpret, you're trying to perceive, you're trying to push it to the storage space for a future retrieval. And retrieval is where you're trying to recall those pieces of information from your memory which you have already stored during the encoding. So, and it has been shown in various experiments that the brain is so designed that it has pre-designated parts, pre-designed and pre-designated parts to facilitate encoding and retrieval, which was established through a PET test. PET test, which stands for the positron emission tomography test, wherein the various concerned parts of the brain are connected to the chemically activated electrodes, which helps in converting the chemical activity on the brain into the electric indicators or signals for our observation, for the experimenter's observation and interpretation. So it was very clearly observed that when the subject in the experiment, when the person was engaged in encoding the information into the memory, the left hemisphere of the brain was seen to be very active, which was indicated by the chemical activity which was converted into the electric signals visibly. Whereas when the same person was engaged in retrieval of the information from the memory, the right hemisphere of the brain was seen to be passing more indicators than the left. So this was a very critical experiment which established the fact that the hemispheres of the brains are of the brain are pre-designated, have the pre-designated spaces which are dedicated to facilitate encoding and retrieval functions of the brain. Okay, so that is about stages of memory, memory storage, spaces, types of long-term memory, and the functions of brain with regard to the memory. Okay, so that takes us to understand the short-term memory further, uh, which can be understood with the help of very interesting experiments by Sperling. So Sperling had conducted a set of experiments wherein the experiment is broadly divided into two stages. One where the subject of to the experiment is asked to report the whole report. Whole report would mean something like you are given a set of letters as you see on the screen, and you are asked to it is flashed before you just for a second, maybe a couple of seconds, and then you are asked to recall as many letters as you can from the whole collection of letters. So that was one, that was whole report. And there was another part called as partial report, wherein the set of letters is shown before you, is flashed before you for a very brief duration, as a second, couple of seconds, and then you are asked to recall the letters that are in a particular row. So for instance, it's flashed, the arrangement of letters is flashed before you, and then you're asked to recall the letters of second row only. That performance is called as partial report. So what was observed is, as you can see the graph, the graph suggests that the number of letters in the display, as the number of letters in the display increases, the whole report performance levels off at 4.5 letters on an average. Whole report performance finally goes, it starts from somewhere from 2, and as number of letters on the card increase, the whole report also increases to an extent, but only to a limited extent, and it settles at 4.5 as you see the blue line, which is the performance of the candidate on whole reporting. Whereas the partial report performance continues to increase, thereby demonstrating the basic existence of a large capacity of sensory memory. So it suggests that your sensory memory has a large capacity, and it has the ability to retain more information, ability to record more information. It may not be able to retain for a long period of time, but it can observe, it can record the information and make a quick recall of some of the letters. As you can see, as the size of the number of letters displayed goes up, the partial report performance also goes up, up to 10. However, what the next graph shows is that partial report performance is also falling down. When was it seen falling down? It was seen falling down when there was a, so there is a there, so the experiment goes like this. There is there's a series of letters are shown, and then there is a beep which is followed by a beep of three varying tones. A high tone beep would suggest you to recall the letters from top row. A medium tone beep will suggest you to recall the letters from middle row, and a low tone beep would suggest you to recall the letters from the lower the first row or the bottommost row, right? So so as long as the beep was immediately followed by the display of the letters, the partial report performance kept improving, kept increasing. However, when the experimenter gave a significant gap between the display of the letters and the beeping of the tone, the partial report performance started falling down, which means which means that the sensory memory is not capable of holding on to the information for too long. With every passing second, the information starts fading unless we deliberately attend to the information. So it suggests the limitation of the sensory memory, that it cannot hold on to information for too long a time, and it fades unless we pay attention to it. Like, for instance, the lecture that you are listening to now, you may be feeling like you are understanding and you can answer the questions, but whatever is going into your mind now is only settling on your sensory memory through your ears and eyes, of course, through the phonological loop and through your visual sketch pad. Phonological loop, that is through the auditory channel, and your visual sketch pad, that is your eyes, right? Your visual channel. So it seems to be settling, but it is just settling on your sensory memory unless you put it through a deliberate exercise of answering the questions, or bringing it for a discussion, or revisiting this video, or taking up a reading by yourself in the textbook, or making notes. These are, or rehearsing what you have already listened. Unless you attend to these any of these exercises to push the information into your long-term memory, this information is designed to fade off in no time. So stay caution and attend to the stimulus, the information, as soon as you are exposed to it. Okay, working memory, that is the short-term memory, wherein we see the information going through basically the three sensory gateways, namely your visual visuospatial sketchpad, where you are deriving understanding and interpretation of things around you through your eyes, through movements, through coordination, through observation, the kinesthetic, the haptic, or the movement. So all those haptic and kinesthetics, etc., are related to the dynamics, the physical movements, physical coordination of your limbs, and observation through the eyes, followed by episodic buffer, that is through smell and taste, and the phonological loop, as we discussed just a short while ago, through your ears, which gather the speech, which gather the lip reading, and which gather the other acoustic components like music and sound. And the central executive, of course, being the brain, which gathers the stimuli from visual sketchpad, the episodic buffer, and phonological loop. So all this information is processed through the central executive, the working memory, which is processed through the exercises of understanding, interpreting, rehearsing, mugging up, whatsoever approach, and hence it is pushed finally to the long-term memory. Okay, so that's a major revelation that was brought out by Miller in one of his experiments, wherein he calls 7 as the magic number so far the memory is concerned. Why does he call 7 as the magic number? Because as you see here, when in an experiment, in a spree of experiments, when a person is exposed to an arrangement of a list of objects, as you see here: cat, head, king, tape, apple, so on and so forth, and he's given a quick observation of this list, and then he is asked to recall as many words as he or she can. The number of words that he could, that the subject of the experiment could recall, are as many as you see on the screen there on the right hand side: ball, cat, fish, shoe, key, tree, and free. Right, so that's as many as 7. So that has been shown as the capacity of an average human brain, which holds the capacity to retain as many as 7. Plus or minus 2, of course, holds good, but on an average, it has the capacity to hold 7 objects, 7 list of 7 items from a larger list as they are exposed to. Okay. Retrieval is the next, the final stage after the processing, after the storing of information from the short term to the long term. Why do you store? Because you need to retrieve on some or the other occasion. Why are you listening to this lecture here? Because you need to retrieve it when it is a test, when it is an examination, right? You need to recall, you need to retrieve, and that's why retrieval is essential. And how does a retrieval happen, or what happens? What are the various dynamics of retrieval, which comes out very interestingly in one of the Sternberg's experiments, wherein the subject of the experiment is put to these lists of memory lists of words, as you see. If you look at memory list 1, so how does it go? The experiment is something like the subject is exposed to a memory list. For instance, let us consider memory list 1, and then excuse me, and then he's put a probe list item. So he's shown the memory list, and then they take it off, and then they show him a probe list item. And if the probe list item is found, if the subject feels that the probe list item is in the memory list, then he or she has to say yes. If he or she feels that the item is not there, then they have to say no. Okay, so that's not a great test or of capability of excuse me, of capability. Almost all the almost all the subjects to the experiment could crack a correct yes or a correct no to the answer. But what was the thing of interest here is the the time that had elapsed between the onset of the probe and the pressing of yes or no button. That is, if you give a list as small as that you see on memory list 1, which has as many as about 9 words. So out of 9 words, it may not be very difficult for me to retrieve whether I had seen the probe word on the memory list of words. Summit, I can give a quick yes. I may not take more than a second or two to give my response of yes, because I see the word in both the lists. Whereas if I'm exposed to a list which is a lot longer, so there are about how many? 4 plus 5, 9, 11 into 5, about 55 words list is what you see on memory list 2. And if you give me a probe word, after you expose me to this and then you take it out and then you put a probe word desert, this may not happen in the same 1 second or two. This may take a little longer, right? So this suggests that retrieval is the function of the size of the information that you are searching from, right? Decision time, as you may look at the bottom line statement of this slide, decision time increases directly with the length of the memory list. So retrieval is a function of the size of the memory list that you are dealing with. So in memory list 1 and probe list 1, I may give a quick response in a second, whereas in memory list 2 and probe list 2, I may take about 10 seconds because I have to virtually search through my memory, see if the word desert is or was there on the memory list or not. I may be correct, but I may not be fast enough, or I may not be as fast as I was, as quick as I was in memory list 1 and probe list 1. So that suggests the limitations of retrieval, brain's retrieval. Okay, so that takes us to the process of shifting from working memory, that is short-term memory, to long-term memory, wherein we have, it is shown very clearly through certain experiments that we have our own approaches, methods of attributing importance or priority to what you are learning, and you tend to recall in accordance with the importance that you attribute, or in accordance with the point of time of your learning, which came out in this very interesting experiment, which is called a free recall experiment. Say, for instance, like the list that you saw in the previous slide, you have drum, curtain, bell, coffee, and then you have earth, knife, stair, and dog. So if this is the set of words we consider for the free recall experiment is where you have a set of words and you are allowed to recall any words, not necessarily in a particular or a row or column, but you can recall any number of words. Now, there was a very interesting pattern that was observed during the recall, right? So as it was observed, the possibility, the likeliness of the first 5 words, that is drum, curtain, bell, coffee, school, and the last 5 words, say cousin, earth, knife, stair, and dog, the likeliness of recalling these words was higher than the words like sailor, hot, or desert. What does this suggest? This gave rise to a concept called primacy. Primacy is the ones that occur in the beginning. You tend to give certain more priority, weightage, importance, significance to the first words. You tend to remember whichever appears in the beginning, right? Drum, curtain, bell. You tend to remember. And the second concept, that is recency, by virtue of the benefit of having read the last 4 words most recently as compared to the words before that, that is cousin, earth, knife, stair, dog. These are the 10 words that are more likely to be recalled successfully as compared to the other words, which is what the graph that you see suggests. The primacy, the beginning words, it shows the recall value is very high, and the most recent words, the recall value is again high, but the words in the middle between the first and the last is low because they are neither prime nor the most recent, right? So that's how our priorities, our methods, approaches are, take shape, and those are the various dynamics while shifting the information from working memory to long-term memory. Okay, so we are now into long-term memory completely. Long-term memory, as we had discussed, it's an endless space of storage space of information which you can recall, which where you can deposit any amount of information and you can recall at any given point of time. However, it doesn't happen so easily, so effectively. Sometimes you may have to use certain smart tactics to recall or retrieve from your memory some of the tactics that you may have done several times. So, for instance, mnemonics. Mnemonics is a shortcut of remembering otherwise difficult things. So, for instance, there is a sentence that you read in the image: "My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas." How does this help? In what regard is this? In what way is this helping me in remember what? Right. So if you look at the first letter of every word from "my" to "pizzas," uh, uh, the order in which the letters, if you isolate the first letters from the words, it represents the order, the sequence in which the 9 planets are organized in this solar system. My Mercury, very Venus, educated Earth, mother Mars, just Jupiter, served Saturn, us Uranus, 9 Neptune, pizzas Pluto, right? So that could be a mnemonic, that could be a smart and shortcut way of remembering things easily. Likewise, you elaborate on the information through discussion, through making notes, through describing, or through deliberating, debating, or with the help of acronyms, rhyming, abbreviations, retrieval cues. Those are some of the ways in which you can recall or retrieve the information from long-term memory. Okay, now, so as we said, it's not so easy. Sometimes we have hindrances, we have you know challenges, we have limitations while deriving the information and which interfere between you and the retrieval of the memory, and the two broad types of interferences that we can understand here is retroactive interference. Retroactive interference, where your attempt to retrieve an old information is being blocked by a new piece of related information. Say, for instance, your phone number, your mobile number has changed. You've got a new mobile number. For some purpose, you are in need of your old phone number to be mentioned somewhere, and now you face the challenge of retrieving your old phone number because the new information is blocking your ability to retrieve the old information. Retroactive interference, right? Likewise, proactive interference, where a old information is blocking your attempt to retrieve the new information. This often is seen happening in when your ATM pin changes, or when your customer ID on an internet banking changes. We always have the tendency to offer the old password because your attempt to get the new one is being blocked by you're so conditioned, you're so habituated to offer the old password, you end up giving the old password, and the system reminds you that it's a wrong password, and then you realize that you have changed your password, or you have changed your customer ID, as I said, and then you correct it with the realization, and you go to the. So these are a couple of interferences between your memory and information, which prevent you from retrieving the right information sometimes. Sometimes due to the old information blocking the new information, which is proactive, or the new information blocking the old information, called retroactive. So those are, and some of more long term memory dynamics might include rehearsals. Of course, rehearsal is one way of pushing the stimuli through sensory memory, where you are rehearsing it by way of understanding it, by way of elaborating upon it, by way of listening to a source, and then pushing it to long-term memory. We understand rehearsal, where we are doing same thing multiple times, so that the stimulus or stimuli get transferred from sensory memory to long-term memory. Okay. Repression is, how do we understand repression? Repression is a deliberate tendency to deliberate mechanism, uh, which prevents certain thoughts or memories or feelings from entering the subconscious awareness, right? Repression, say for instance, some of the ugly events like a car accident, right? A person may not remember the details despite being behind the wheel, because it's a heavy incident, and it is repressed down the memory lane, and it may not be a very pleasant childhood abuse. A child who faced abuse might grow up with no recollection of incidents, even though they had a profound impact on their life. So these are some of the dynamics of memory which prevents the recollection or retrieval of certain events which are undesirable, which are worth repressing under the layers of the memory. So that's another dynamic of long-term memory. Context effects is another dynamic of long-term memory, where the context of learning and the context of recall makes a lot of difference. So for instance, the image that you see here, this was a very interesting experiment conducted on a bunch of scuba divers who, this set of scuba divers were given the learning about the instructions of do's and don'ts during the scuba diving under the water. So it so happened that some of the divers had these instructions learned above the water on the surface of the land, and some of the remaining scuba divers had to learn these instructions under the water. So now you see what happened during the learning when the scuba diver was in the water, and during the recall of the same instructions when they were in the water. The recall value, the success rate of recall, was registered as 32%. Whereas when the learning happened, you look at the second row images, learning happened in the water, and the retrieval was attempted on the land. The retrieval rate, successful retrieval, was only 23%. What happened? Likewise, if you see, when the learning happened on the land and the retrieval also happened on the land, the success rate of retrieval was 38%. Whereas when the learning happened on the land and retrieval was attempted in the water, the success rate of retrieval recalling was only 24%. So what is coming out? There's a pattern, there's a definite pattern, there's an interesting pattern which says that the context in which you had learned should be similar to that of the context in which you had recalled it, right? So that's a that was an interesting examination experiment that brought out the significance of context in reference to the memory retrieval. Likewise, flashbulb memories is another dynamic of long-term memory. Flashbulb memories, as you may realize, how do we define flashbulb memory? Is a vivid, detailed memory of a highly emotional or significant event, often associated with surprising or impactful news. So, for instance, when I was a student, and there was this unfortunate incident of the collapse of the World Trade Center in an attack, and that those are the moments that are still very vividly, very fresh on the top of the mind. If I can actually recall the very place where I was standing that day when I was going through the news. I can recall the faces of the people who were around me during that during the first exposure to that news. I can recall the discussions that we immediately had. I can as well recall the positions of the people sitting around me at the breakout of that news. Not because I've got such a great memory, but the event itself was so momentous, was so very heavy, was so very intense and impactful that it imprints the memory footprints of the memory on the brain so very vividly that the recall can happen very easily, right? So that's what is referred to as a flashbulb memory. Okay, and the last aspect of memory, very interesting aspect, is memory is constructive. It's not as static as what you push into your memory. Memory can be played around with. Memory can be altered. Memory can be influenced. Memory can be impacted, right? So, for instance, this was an interesting experiment, which is an attempt to look at the subject's ability to figure out the stimulus which is very much out of focus or moderately out of focus. So, for instance, the object, the creature that you see in the image is very much out of focus. It's not distinct. It's not very clear, and there could imagine there is another photograph which is moderately out of focus, which is not very crystal clear yet, but a little clearer than this. So at this stage, if you put this image to a bunch of students, they may have varied opinions. The house may be divided into calling it a cat or a squirrel or a mongoose or a rabbit or a hedgehog or a porcupine, right? Your house may be hung among all these options. But if you put the memory, if you put another image which is a little clearer, people might form more clearer perceptions about the creature, and they may actually hold on to it. They may actually however, so what comes out is the subjects who are exposed to a very much out of focus object, like in this, their memory is more driven by their opinions and perceptions more than the facts in the image. So your memory is influenced by opinions, your guess, your hunch, your intuition, and your perception about it, and less by the facts, which establishes the fact that memory can be constructed not only by the facts about the information, but also the perceptions, intuitions that all of us carry around a piece of object. It's essentially when something is unclear. Now this is an image here. Imagine a news which is not authentic, not authorized, not confirmed. So what airs around is the rumors, the gossips, the opinions. These are the things that influence the memory, and we tend to construct our own memory in the capacity of perceptions and opinions. That's another nature of memory, which says that it can be constructed, and which in fact leads to various interventions, psychological and psychiatric interventions while dealing with various conditions of people, like hypnosis. You must have heard of hypnosis, where people are taken into um a state of being, either into the future or past or an imaginary situation, where they're given to believe certain conditions around them, and they're allowed to talk. They're allowed to have a free conversation with with the counselor. So, so these are some of the initiatives that bring out the fact that memory is not static. Memory can be constructed, memory can be reconstructed, memory can be